Now, I mean, the burden of the conclusive speech is left to Tony Baker, another guardian angel working for the North of England P&I Club, and he's head of the Loss Prevention Department. And he's a man of experience. He has been at sea for 16 years, serving as a DEX officer, and he has been also senior lecturer at the UK Marine College. The floor to Tony.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come and talk at this event, which is a wonderful excuse for me to come back to this wonderful city of Napoli, which I do as often as I can. I'm going to talk about seafarer standards, and the question that you may ask is why at a predominantly legal conference, particularly in a session where we're looking at gas and oil, transportation and associated risks, why am I suddenly going to talk about seafarer standards? Well, the answer is because seafarer standards are integral to everything we're talking about, and I believe fundamentally affect all of our jobs and the work that we do. Seafarers' performance, crew performance on ships, affects the performance of the ship, affects the efficiency of the ship, it affects the number of accidents or incidents that might happen, and that has a direct influence on the insurance business, it has a direct influence on the legal business, and of course it has a real influence on the bottom line of the ship operators, their commercial work, and everything associated with that. So seafarer standards, to me, are quite integral and important to what we're talking about today. I've entitled this presentation, The Right Crew. And what do I mean by the right crew? Well, first of all, I'm going to start off with a quote from North of England's one of its first loss prevention publications. This one is dated 1896, so it's 120 years old. It was written, obviously, before the transportation of oil and gas and many other commodities in bulk had even started. But this is in what we used to call our suggestions to managing owners and masters, and it says a good ship was nothing unless it had the right crew. So the right crew is what we're going to talk about. And 120 years on, that situation has not changed. For everything that we do, for all the systems we have in place, for all the regulations we have, for all the efficiency of our ships, the right crew is essential. And the right crew on any ship depends on a lot of different matters, not just the right crew will vary with the ship type. So the right crew on an offshore vessel that requires DP, ship handling experience, the right crew on a gas carrier that requires that sort of experience, the right crew on an oil tanker with the oil majors crew matrix to deal with. All of these right crews will be different but essential for each of those ship types and each of those sectors. So that's easy then. All we need is the right crew. But we're faced in the current industry, as always, with lots of pressures. And the particular pressures that I want to concentrate today on getting that right crew are pressure on costs, pressure on availability of crew, and pressure on standards. I can't, as an insurer, do much about costs. Well, I can do a little bit by trying to influence the size of the premiums. But what I'm going to concentrate on today is availability and standards. We heard earlier this morning a very worrying statistic that the shortage of officers and other seafarers is going to be enormous by the year 2020, 2025. BIMCO statistics certainly predict that, and other statistics also, other research also suggests that as well. I'm not in the prediction business. I'm a P&I person. I'm an insurer. I don't do predictions. I'm also English. And if you'd predicted, if I'd been asked a year ago my predictions of whether we would leave the European Union, I would have said, of course not. So predictions are a dangerous business. But there is no doubt that we are pretty much predicting or expecting a difference between the supply of seafarers and the demand of seafarers, and that has inevitably going to have an effect on whether we can get the right seafarers on our ships. The other thing I want to mention is standards and performance. Now, North of England, like lots of other insurers, looks at its claims. In particular, we try and do, as far as we can, root cause analysis of any of our claims that are in excess of $500,000 US. And our root cause analysis results of those sorts of claims over the last 4 or 5 years reveal some not surprising statistics, some not surprising results. It reveals basically, as has been also mentioned earlier, that most things are due to the human performance in terms of crew injury, ship or admiralty claims, and cargo claims. All of those at one measure or another, if you go back far enough in the root cause analysis, can be put down to the human behavior and the human performance. If I give an example, for instance, on ship claims, pilots' interaction with the bridge team, collision avoidance, where people don't take the appropriate action under the collision regulations. If we look at cargo claims, for instance, in the gas and oil sector, then we're looking at failure to do basic sampling and failure to operate the loading and discharge systems to avoid contamination. Most of these, if not all of them, at some level will be due to human performance. So what we know is that we've got a seafarer standard issue that depends on how seafarers are behaving and how they're performing. And we can look at that by saying, well, if we're looking at competence, competence you can define as the knowledge and ability of the seafarer, but in our experience, it's more about how the seafarers apply that knowledge. All the seafarers on ships are STCW qualified. That doesn't necessarily make them competent. All of the seafarers who have a collision know their collision regulations, but that doesn't mean to say that they have followed them. And in terms of things like cargo claims, there is perhaps a worrying lack of practical knowledge on how cargo claims or cargo processes are handled, and that lack of knowledge is another issue. I'm going to jump on now to, I've borrowed some statistics from an organization called Seagull, Norwegian organization that provides CBT training for seafarers and has also the ability to benchmark the seafarers' performance in that CBT training. And for a massive sample of seafarers, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands rather than thousands here, they've actually compiled some results of how they think those seafarers actually perform against what they should know. And if you can see the chart, there's a fairly normal distribution of the performance results. But if you would say that every STCW seafarer should be qualified, and if tested against their STCW ability, you would expect 70–75% performance as a pretty sort of minimum. A very small number of seafarers, less than 20% of seafarers in this particular survey actually achieve that. But more worrying, there is perhaps a 7 or 8% group of seafarers, 1 in 12 seafarers, who are actually less than 40% competent against basic STCW performance. So not only have we got a shortage of seafarers, the ones that we have got measurably are not performing to the extent that they should be. And from our point of view, looking at claims performance and claims root cause analysis, we know that even in the terms of what they should know, they are not applying that knowledge either. So against this background, we've got to look at getting the right seafarers on our ship. We've got a shortage of seafarers. Some of those out there are not up to standard, and many of them are not applying their knowledge when it comes to the practical situation. So in terms of a ship operator wanting to get good seafarers, the right seafarers on his ship, he has got to take steps to attract, recruit, and retain the right seafarers. And to be frank about this, what that actually means is to try and filter out the wrong seafarers. And taking a very sort of practical view of this, if you're a good ship operator and you want the good people on your ship, you've got to filter out and take steps to filter out the wrong seafarers so that you've got the good ones on your ship, and to be honest, the wrong ones might go elsewhere. Not a very good view of the industry, but I think that is the situation we're in at the moment. And I did my best to try and keep to the sort of the 10 minutes or so rule. So in summary, against this quite difficult background of a lack of availability of seafarers, in certain cases a lack of standard of seafarers, we've got to do our best as ship operators to try and attract the right people, and we've got to help them out by having good systems, both soft systems such as management systems and hard systems such as good equipment, so that those seafarers can act responsibly and do their jobs to the best of their ability. And if we get that combination of right people, the right crew, the good systems, the good interaction with those systems, and encompass it in a decent safety culture and safety management system, then as any organization, we'll have put ourselves in a better position to operate efficiently, to operate commercially, and to prevent the incidents and accidents that cost the industry such a substantial amount of money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. A very extensive contribution to one of the most critical subjects of shipping and energy, the quality of and the standard of seafarer, an endless debate that, we will continue, I'm sure, talking about for many, many years to come.